Great. So hello also to the audience out there on the internet. Hello to people over here. Hello to our wonderful panelists who are with me today. It's Hannah Raymond Cox, who's a game designer who made We Should Totally Just Stab Caesar, which is one of the games that you can see in the village area over there. We have Imre Gelé, who's part of Nerial, who made Orwell's Animal Farm, which we're also showing in the same area over there. Hi, Imre, can you hear us? Great, see you waving, that's great. And we have Gianluca Pandolfo, who's part of the team that made the Statues game, which you can see in Siemens Hall, which is installed there, which is very simple to play because it has just one button. And what we've done in this program is kind of group together games and invite the designers to talk about them that are kind of thematically related. So all of these games somehow deal with overthrow or restart of a political system in their very own way. And we'll talk about how each game kind of does that. They're very, very different. It'll be interesting to compare. For the session, we thought we'd kind of first talk about Statues because it's extremely short. We'll be able to play the whole game. And then go on to Orwell's Animal Farm, which we'll just see like a very small slice about, but we can talk a little bit about, which is much longer narrative game. And then end with Hannah's game, We Should Totally Stab Caesar, which is also nice because you can maybe continue to talk with Hannah while she's here in person and also directly go and play it. Yeah. So without further ado, let's start it. One thing that we really like doing is kind of playing the game while talking about it. So Nick, do you want to start off Statues? And also, do we have any volunteer players here in the audience who'd like to live play the game on Twitch while we talk about it? Yes, okay, please. So you can just go over and stand behind Nick and sit there and we'll get your game up on screen. Cool. So, Gianluca.
Hi. Perfect.
Great. Maybe, do you want to introduce yourself or a little bit like kind of what was the team behind this game or in what kind of context did you make?
Yes, sure. So, hi, everyone. My name is Gianluca Pandolfo. I'm 1/4 of Space Backyard, a team consisting of Simone Tranchina, who is our 3D and animator guy. Then we have Alessandra Scidiacono, who is our generalist and creative director. Then we have Maddalena Grattarola, who is our narrative designer, and I'm the programmer / generalist at Space Backyard. So we participated back then when I wasn't part of Space Backyard, because it only consisted of Simone and Alessandro back then. And I first met him at the Amaze. So we had a conversation, we talked, I hosted the Watermelon Game Jam and they submitted the game. And then we were like, oh, maybe we can someday, I don't know, create a little game together. And then the Ludum Dare number 40 came up with the title, The More You Have, the Worse It Is. And then we started creating in this small amount of time our short nursery rhyme game called Statues.
And when you were developing it, did you think of the children's game Statues? That was
yes, this was our first intention. While we were like coming up with the idea, one of us were like, yeah, but why don't we play 1, 2, 3 Stella in Italian? I don't know if in English it's 1, 2, 3 star or it's red light, green light. But yeah, it was like, okay, how can we manage to make a game in such a small amount of time, which doesn't also stress us out? And so we started off with that simple idea, just holding one button for the whole interaction.
Yeah, maybe you can talk a little bit about the decision kind of to reduce the controls so radically. Like, was that part of the first idea or did it come from the theme somehow?
it did come from the theme because the more you have, the word is. We wanted to limit it, so it was kind of also like we actually like to give the player not that many controls over things, so just a focus on what we want to tell. So because we are both we are all four individuals who really love experimenting with new ways of storytelling, and the storytelling is in the center, it's in the focus. So by really reducing hardly the interaction to plainly focus on the experience, that's was always our goal, and it's always our goal.
Well, and how did you kind of mash this up with the story? Because I think in the children's game, there's just a very kind of primal situation of one person in power, and that's it. And this, you kind of spent some time to flesh it out a bit more, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we had some obelisk scheme in mind, something with a king, something with the emperor in the new clothes, you know, that so we kind of wanted to create the situation where you are in power or something, and kind of a delusional king which doesn't see his people. So so it really gets harder and harder for him to see through and see the reality. Yeah, that was then our main intention.
I was wondering if you expect players to identify more with the king or with the mob.
Oh, we leave that gap completely open because we want to really give the user enough space for interpretation. So we don't set anything. So we just create the experience so the user can create its own view of the thing. So they can sympathize with the king in a way or sympathize with the people.
Yeah, it's interesting. And in a funny way, to me, it's like the action is kind of tied together by the players. It's almost as if you're kind of controlling both. You're just kind of advancing the story, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of the kind of art style decisions that you made? Like, was that a style that you immediately landed on, or where did you kind of get this kind of color scheme that's going on?
So basically, Simone had already created some models while we were talking about it. So it was really fast. Also the king, and we were like we had also like roots in the soil, which has a similar art style, and kind of used that art style to kind of progress faster in the whole process. So we wanted to highlight, of course, the king, because he's kind of in a spot because he's also telling the lullaby. And the fog is grayish because it's a metaphor, actually. Yeah, it's pretty metaphoric. I'm in a talk right now.
And do any of you have backgrounds in theater or something? Because I feel like it's the whole scene is so theatrical. Also, like with the spotlight and the stage, it's almost almost like a theater style.
Yeah, it was kind of during that decision. It was like just put him on a wall, do it Orwell-esque, a great wall, because nothing is behind. This is the last position of the ruler.
Right. Right. Really cool. Like I especially like also the lighting effects. Kind of when you hold down the space bar, that it keeps the torches and the crown is kind of the main ingredients. Yeah, it's together really nicely.
Yeah, because
do you like? Would you consider this a political game in any way?
let's say it like that. We create something which may be political, but with us without us being political at that point, because it's really up to the user, to the user experience, and also to the player to decide whether it's political or not.
Yeah. So it's more like a kind of a fable or an open.
Yeah, it's like a nursery rhyme, like a fable. Yes, you could use it like that. So we also do that in the other games, like in Roots in the Soil and in Bird of Passage, which came out 2019. Yeah.
Cool. So maybe this is a good kind of overview of the game, and we can move on, and then we can like all talk together when we've seen all the games later on and compare them a little bit. So thanks so much,
cool.
Gianluca,
Thanks for playing the game.
Yeah, super cool. So Nick, if you could start up Orwell's Animal Farm. Let's see if Imre is in the connection. Hey, Imre. How's it going? Maybe you could introduce yourself quickly and also kind of the team behind the game as we started up.
Yes, hi, my name is Imre, and I co-founded Bossa Studios, which is known for comedy games. And then by the end of that, I knew that I wanted to do different style of games. So I'm in the process of starting a new studio, and one of the first steps was that in collaboration with Nerio, we created Orwell's Animal Farm, and we worked with the Orwell estate to create it. And it was quite the experience. Let me just say that.
Beasts
and
land and climb.
Kind of.
Hearken to my joyful tidings.
Are you like a fan of the book, or like how did it come about? Like the idea to kind of do a game based on the novel.
So I think there was multiple inspirations for that. So I grew up in a communist country, and in Hungary, and in a politically active family. And when I say politically active, on the wrong side of politics, as the government considered it. And so I was raised in Animal Farm. Animal Farm was read to me as a small child next to The Little Prince and Winnie the Pooh. So it was quite, very early on. It was something that I was exposed to a lot. And I remember that I wanted to make a game based on this for the longest time. Like when I was a teenager, I actually found my original game designers. They were horrible ideas, but the point is that, that was a very long-running desire to create this. And then a few years ago, we felt that it is a time that this game needs to be made because of what's happening in politics around the world. So we felt that this is the right time to create it.
Cool. I'll just ask into the audience if anyone wants to play while we chat. Feel free to come up. Otherwise, Nick will also be very happy to to play. But like the floor is yours if you do want to just play, and also you'll be able to ask questions while you play if you want. Cool. So I guess my first question is actually really like, how did you what was the creative process in this kind of transformation from linear story into game? Like, what kind of different mechanics maybe did you land on or try out? And what was kind of the thing that you ended up using, like with this combination of, cards that come up and also really nice illustrations?
So we knew that we want to contain things. I don't think that Animal Farm would have worked as a first-person shooter or whatever, right? So that was like a lot of gameplay was ruled out. And what we liked about Animal Farm, beyond the relevance of its message, of its anti-oppression message, is that running a farm and running a political system is gamey by definition, because it's defined by rules and content and decisions, very, very simple decisions, really. A lot of them, but simple decisions. And so we felt that it was a very, the best way to translate it is that you are running the farm. We had a lot of discussions about whose perspective it is. Are you playing as the pigs? Are you playing as the animals? Are you, what is your perspective? And in the end, we settled that you're kind of playing as the narrator, and you're choosing whose opinion you're listening to and whose desires you are trying to follow and who you're trying to please. And it's a little bit of a tycoon game, a little bit of an adventure game. We had versions of this design which were much more complicated, but it did not quite work. And throughout the development, and I remember very early on when I was talking to the estate, I said to them as well the same, is that I don't think Animal Farm needs reinvention. I don't think we need, at least we didn't want to make Animal Farm in space, right? Like we just wanted to do Animal Farm. And in fact, it was a very conscious decision with the team, the amazing team which came together, which was not just Nerio, but Emily Short, who is now the narrative director at Failbetter, and like a bunch of other talented people who came together to make this game. We knew that we had this choice that we will be criticized for something. Right? I mean, I got death threats both from right and left throughout the development because everyone thought I'm on the other side. But we knew we would be criticized, and we very consciously decided to be criticized for being too close to the book rather than too far from the book. And with that in mind, we still had to add a lot of options for player choice, right? So what we've done is that we looked at oppressive regimes of all sizes and colors and flavors, and we just tried to forecast of like what would have happened if Snowball remains in power and whatever. And then, for example, that what we modeled after the Chinese industrialist version of the communist oppression. So we still wanted to keep close, and always the mantra was, what would Orwell do?
Interesting. I also read, I didn't play several of them, but I read that there's several different endings also. Would be curious, like kind of how you selected for which outcomes are achievable.
Yeah, so again, this was one of those examples that, we wanted player choice. It was important that the player can, put themselves into the game, but at the same time, we didn't want to venture too far away from what the book was talking about. At the end of the day, we did not want that, the pigs are running a beautiful farm and it's everyone is happy, because that's Babe the film, right? Like, that's not what we want to do. This is a story about oppression. So there is no, we couldn't have an ending which is about something else. This was a story about oppression. This is not a story about animals. The animals are props in the story. And so there is a wide variety of endings. So for example, Snowball could be in power, the humans could take over, there could be a sustained regime of animals. So there are multiple very different outcomes, which are built through the game, the chapters of the game. As you are progressing, there are pivotal decisions you can make, and individual animals can live or die. So it could be that certain animals you might want to save and you might be able to, and others might die in the process. So I think there's a lot of micro and macro player choice and player influence, but again, it was important to us that every single path possible and every outcome possible is thematically fitting into Orwell's original book.
Well, and did working on the game kind of change your view on the novel? Like, did you discover something that you didn't think about before while reading the novel, or do you see it differently after making the game?
I think it's very hard to work on something or read or reread and not change your mind. There are books which I remember reading as a child and reading as an adult. It hits very differently. Animal Farm hits very differently now, especially in the context of what happens around the world. And vice versa. When you adapt something, it's very difficult not to put yourself into it. And it was very difficult because obviously we wanted to be as truthful to Orwell. This was not my story. This is not Emily Short's story. This is not Nerio's, Francois and Tamara's story. It is Orwell's story. But it's very difficult not to put yourself in. So I think it worked both ways. I feel like the book, working on this, changed my perspective. It changed my perspective on the book and life. And equally, I'm pretty sure that however strongly we try to avoid it, I'm pretty sure that our personalities got imprinted in the game as well as we went through the adaptation process.
Maybe a strange question is, would you like to experience a situation like an Animal Farm where there's like a real fresh start or like a complete change of regime kind of, and it's all open out in the open kind of what happens?
It is look, I there are pessimists and optimists in a word, right? And everyone looks at the word differently, and different perspective you apply on life, you can have very different outcomes. So what you're sampling, is life getting better or worse, right? In a lot of ways, it's getting much worse. On the other hand, a lot of statistics in life worldwide is much better than they were 10, 20, 50 years ago. So it's all about your sampling size. But for example, regime change, Hungary, where I was born, is a great example of that. You know, we went through a revolution which failed against the Germans in the Second World War, and then a revolution against the oppressive Soviets, which failed during the Cold War. And then in '89, Hungary was one of the first countries to change regime in a very peaceful way. And I was part of that process. You know, as a child, I was there in the protest, and I supported a party which was called the Young Democrats Society, which is fascinating because that party, which then later on changed its name and became a right-wing party, which then is now an oppressive party and a regime in Hungary. So if you take it from that sampling size, no, it did not work in Hungary. Hungary went through exactly this story of Animal Farm, where a fresh start turned sour. At the same time, I always try to be hopeful and see that a lot of factors in life are getting better. So, but maybe I'm just trying to keep myself to make myself feel better. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So maybe last question before we move on, just about the kind of more aesthetic choices. Like, how did you arrive at this very kind of pleasant art style? I think it's almost a bit surreal and kind of like illustrations in a book. Like that's something that I find really remarkable in this. Like, how was the process to get to that?
That's exactly right. Like that's literally the illustration in the book. That was always our goal. And there are some amazing illustrated versions of Overthrow. There is a graphic novel. There is a fantastic illustrated version illustrated by Ralph Steadman, which is amazing. And so we searched a lot, but we kept coming back that we'd like to do this version, which is, as you said, is a storybook illustration. Throughout the game, the visuals reflect. So the seasons change and the coloring change and the visuals change across what happens to the farm. But we always wanted to have this very traditional book illustration art style. So I was actually quite pleased with that. And we get a lot of fun out of creating these animals, of course. You know, drawing Napoleon and drawing the boxer and the other animals we all learned to love or hate. That was great fun.
Cool. And I mean, maybe it's just a recommendation for people to check it out also in the exhibition. I think also the audio layer is quite important, right? I mean, you have a lot of voice acting in it.
Yes.
Was that also like what was kind of the concept for the audio layer in this game for you?
So we had again with the music, it was brilliant, you know, because there's so many opportunities for both original tracks and also being inspired by you know, communist propaganda music and all that. But with the voiceover as well, because the game is fairly simple in the sense that you know, it's the same screen and then you break out to different locations, but you keep going back to looking at the farm. We felt that we want more richness, and it's not just the artwork but the voiceover as well. Who's a fantastic actor. He was the voice in Assassin's Creed Origins. The lead character. So it was great fun, and I think it just brings a richness, the music and audio and the sound effects and the voiceover. You know, sound is almost as important as sight in games. So I think we wanted to paint this very rich universe with that as well. Yes.
Right. Cool. So maybe let's leave it there and talk a little bit about We Should Totally Stab Caesar, and then we can kind of chat a little bit all together after that. I know we thought maybe it would be fun to show kind of a video that was one of the inspirations for it, right?
Yes, please. For a certain generation of us, the title's a bit familiar, but for those of you who aren't, here is a little reminder of the thing, one of the things that prompted this game, which, yeah, I never claimed to be deep. Like, let's start there. It is an academic text. Will the sound?
Why should Caesar get to stomp around like a giant while the rest of us try not to get smushed under his big feet? What's so great about Caesar? Brutus is just as cute as Caesar. Okay, Brutus is just as smart as Caesar. People totally like Brutus just as much as they like Caesar. And when did it become okay for one person to be the boss of everybody, huh? Because that's not what Rome is about. We should totally just stab Caesar! Gretchen Wiener's had cracked.
Great. Can you give people who have no idea about pop culture a little bit of background to what we just saw?
So we just saw an extract from Mean Girls by Tina Fey and many others. And in this scene, the girl talking is the second in command to the head mean girl, Regina George, who has just ruined her life and is using the historical story of just totally stabbing Caesar to also explain what she thinks they should do as a society to this mean girl, Regina George. And it's iconic. Like, let's be real. If you're of a certain millennial age, but even people older, people younger, there's something about that emotional connection to the historical narrative and the camp classicness of the whole thing that stuck in my mind in a huge way. So that's where the title comes from.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, let's load up the game. I think there's a shortcut on the desktop.
While you're loading, I just want to correct you that Mean Girls is not popular culture, it's just culture.
Okay, great. I mean it in the best way. Yeah. Thank you, Raymond. Great. And Hannah, I mean, maybe you can talk just a tiny bit about your background, right? Like how it related also, because I mean, as far as I know, you also like have a background in history, right?
Yeah, so I was sent to university to study international relations and ended up doing history as well as part of my degree. I'm a modern historian, which means that Rome was not one of the things I was studying, but between IR, which is about how people govern and how people think, and history, which is about looking at the circumstances that led people to make decisions. And I also worked in politics, and I worked in international humanitarian rights organizations, and I did a lot of interactive and immersive theater and interactive immersive poetry. Basically, I've had a portfolio career, and I was challenged to write a game. And I thought, well, what should I write it about? And I thought, well, we should just totally like stab Caesar. So yeah, it's a mixture of all manner of things. It's also written in this sort of Californian style because I spent 7 years in San Francisco. So it's very much that. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, this game is made in Twine, like text-based. So players have to imagine a lot, do a lot of work kind of on their own and read. But there's a lot of different ways you can make Twine games. And I'd be curious kind of what were some of the storytelling decisions that you made, or like how much more on the kind of narrative side is this, or like what kind of choices were important for you to build in?
So I had never heard of scope creep. So I designed not thinking about it, which I highly recommend not doing. The choices, I had 2 full-time jobs when I was writing this. So the choices I made were dumb. But what I wanted to do is write a Twine game where you have a fixed goal. You always want to stab Caesar, where you have certain choices that can take place over 3 actions. You basically have a day and a half to figure out how to stab Caesar, and you need to get certain actions done by visiting these locations to get Mark Antony out the way, for example, so that Caesar is not protected, or to acquire weapons that aren't your massive swords because they are not subtle, or to figure out where Caesar's going to be when. And I wanted the choice, I wanted every decision made in the game to have a narrative choice, so many failure states. But once you have committed to stabbing Caesar, I wanted there to be no choice at all. So if you do succeed, if you've done all the legwork and it's really fun and jolly, once you've started lifting that knife, you are lifting that knife and bringing it down again and again.
Yeah, so like, even though, of course, this is history that's very far away, it sounds to me that you actually wanted to take it seriously in a way, right? Or like, where is kind of this border for you between, okay, it's a comedy game, but at the same time, which parts are serious to you?
I think that a lot of people think of the government and participation as a kind of, it doesn't matter, or that it is so far away, that it is so out of your hands. And then some people go the opposite direction and go, revolution, eat the rich. But what does that actually mean? What does that actually look like? And it's a joke, eat the rich. It's a joke, stab Caesar. But jokes made real are how politics works, or memes made real is how politics works. It's why we have, my first jobs were speech writing for politicians in Hong Kong and in Parliament here, and for people who I very much respected and for people who I very much didn't. But the more they repeat something, the truer it becomes. The more we say stab Caesar, the more you get to it, the more I'm starting to ramble.
So can I ask something? I need to do it here. So right now we just had a choice that we had to, like, if we wanted to have like a democratic solution or just stab Caesar. So if you choose one of those options that are supposed to be peaceful and not stabbing Caesar, it just goes around until you actually get to stab him, or?
Sorry. Good question. I put in democracy as an option, and if you want to click back, you can actually attempt democracy. Unfortunately, this game is about totally stabbing Caesar. And this is what happens. The thing is, because I'm not having you play as one senator, I'm having you play as a tidal wave of popular opinion and popular unrest. And if you opt out, the cool senators are all covered in little red flecks. You could have been one of them. You could have been cool. You could have been part of the new regime. And I think when Imre was talking about like what it means to opt in and opt out and what it means to witness or to participate in violent overthrow or to participate in regime change, just because you opt out doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? Just because you don't vote doesn't mean the people aren't going to be elected into power in a democracy. By absenting yourself from the decision, you're not stopping the decision.
Cool. I mean, yeah, let's discuss more in a bit. So to me, it's fascinating that you have kind of experience now game making and in actual politics. And I wonder if you can if you can compare a bit, kind of maybe what kind of experience or knowledge you've kind of brought over from one side to the other, or maybe how your perspective maybe on political change has evolved, like kind of making games.
I think that it takes a lot of bravery to work in politics for a long time, because you have to not get burnt out or discouraged. I think it also takes a lot of bravery to work in games for a long time, because you can't get burnt out or discouraged. That is almost where I think those two things match. I did not choose to go into politics after my degree for very many reasons. One of them being I didn't see my power to affect change, and being in the trenches day after day would have driven me insane. But I also think that there's lots of different forms of governance. Democracy is the one we have right now, but democracy is about consensual action and then application of that decision achieved through consent. With games, the parameters can be limited in different and artificial and shorter ways. You can rapidly iterate in safer spaces because it's not real life. But it also lets you imagine what real life could be like. And that's one of the reasons why I love games and political. All games are political, but specifically games that are overtly political.
Great, thank you. Maybe let's open the open the conversation a bit to all three of you. And starting with you, Hannah, like how are some of the reactions to this game? I'd be very curious, kind of maybe if there's like different styles of how people see it or how they respond. Hannah, how has that been?
I've had a lot of people respond going, why is there so much swearing? A reasonable question, because it's fucking funny. But I think a lot of people say that they felt carried away when they played it. And that's great to hear on my end, because that means I achieved what I got. And they liked that it felt funny and lighthearted. I mean, I got a job in the games industry off the back of this game. So people seem to vibe with it, you know, and some of this is actual historical context and teaches history. This has been used to teach history in schools, which is insane. So even the fretful whimper of my puppy Crowgus is pleasant to my ears, naughtier than Catulus's sparrow, more winning than any girl. As she whines, you'll think she is talking. That's a real advertisement from Caesar's Rome about a lost dog. For all that these people are ridiculous, they are real people. And I think people think that history and also the writing that we do for games doesn't relate to humans. And I think it really does.
Maybe Emre or Gianluca, do you guys want to share about some of the reactions maybe you got to your project?
I think what I mentioned before is that because Orville's name is highly charged and misused to some crazy extent, like the number of quotes I see, which are Orville quotes, which he never indeed say ever. That is fantastic. So our reaction was a lot of anger. Like, as I said, when we announced the game, I got like regular death threats, and at some point the competition is that which death threat is the funniest or funniest death threat of the week. And I had some which were just insane. Like people who were clearly, like, my favorite one was one single sentence without punctuation or capitalization. It's just a page-long email, and if we took that seriously, that would be terrifying. So we just had to make fun of it, right? And so I think that to us it was, and we always had our customer support voice back. We replied all of them. We said, thank you so much. We really it's amazing to see how much you care about Orville. We care so same way. What do you think? And we just asked back some similar questions. So what do you think Boxer represents? And then usually we get an answer back, which suddenly went from a normal person. or they just ignored, right? So we arrived to that setup. There was a lot of anger already, but when the game came out, I think that the reactions were, oh well, I wish I could do more. Oh, it's just a visual novel. And then the other part was we were criticized for sticking too close to the book. But most of the feedback was really positive, and it was about reacting to the importance of this story. Obviously, we could not be as cool as totally stabbing Caesar, obviously.
I am so obsessed with your art. I've got a couple graphics here and there, but it's all done in like Pixlr for free. So the beauty and for both of you, the visual storytelling is so cool, and it's something that I would love to learn more about, being a word nerd, but also China. But yeah, can I ask? Sorry, I'm a nerd and I'm having fun. When you got that negative reaction, why do you think Orwell in particular is still such a touchy subject for so many? Why? Yeah.
He's been simplified down to catchphrases, right? And that's it. And because everything has to be tweet sized, everything has to be simplified down, everything has to be a single issue voter. You're either a baby murderer or you're a respecter of women. That's it. There's no other option. Everything has to be so binary. His subtleties, because he was a flawed man, right? He had many mistakes and many issues, but we can't have that. Like everything has to be a binary 1 or 0 or whatever. And I think that's what in politics is so difficult, is that everything has to be always to the 11. In like Spinal Tap, that you can turn it up all to 11. Like that's everything has to be there, and there's just no other layers. I think that's why, because again, they didn't know anything about the game. They didn't know, and yet it was a lot of anger. I think that's why.
Gianluca, do you want to share a bit how people reacted to your game?
Yeah, since our game is a really, really short game, there was quite mixed feelings, let's say. People were complaining it's too short, but other people were super happy to have such a short experience because they just can play it, and it follows them around in their head for maybe few hours, like some people commented, or for days, and they didn't get rid of the idea, which we kind of intended, to leave that space open for interpretation, to take it with you. And yeah, overall, it was a really nice feedback from our community.
Yeah, I think what's great about the shortness is that it's so good in exhibitions. From that,
but I wish sometimes. Sorry, I wish we had more of this. Like I sometimes kind of hope that. Imagine if we had a 10, 15 experiences like this packed together, and as it's like a museum that you go around, and each of them you try, and each of them is a short experience, and you move on to the next one. I love this. I really like that, and because you made your point. You made your point. You could have made it, much longer, but you made your point already. So why?
Yeah, it's just a statement from our side. It's just also with our other games. I mean, they're super short. The last game was like a Bird of Passage was like, if you read correctly, you're done in 10 minutes. If you go your way through, it takes up to 45 minutes. But also with like Roots in the Soil, as you mentioned, Imre, our games are kind of designed to also be showcased in exhibitions somehow, because we're also in the ZKM in Karlsruhe with like Roots in the Soil. This game just takes 5 minutes. You just look and turn around our little can with the little seed, and so it leaves also space for all controls, and we just do our statement. It's there, and it's for you. It's for the people.
Great. Let's open the floor also for questions. I think we have time for like 2 or 3 people. Are people here in the room? Do people here in the room have questions? Nick, can you see if people on Twitch have questions? Okay, great.
We didn't really get to see how the game works, or maybe I missed it. The statues game.
Oh, you just have to press the spacebar.
And then it shows the people, right? Or
That's where you start the game, and then it's your decision if you hold it or you release it.
oh, okay, I see. Okay.
So if you don't like how the thing's progressing, you can hold the spacebar forever.
might do that.
Yeah, and actually that's also something I do. Like I find it very interesting, the idea there that, you know, you don't have to make the story progress, right? It's just such an interesting thought also that, you know, story progresses because someone does something.
Exactly.
Right? And, you know, you might not like what's happening, or you like what's happening, like kind of like what you said, right? Like story is people basically doing stuff. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of interaction, you can just, you know, of course you have a narrative game, etc. You just have your controller or whatsoever. You can always pause it, but here you're really forced to hold it. So yeah, and this was the kind of, I won't say new mechanic, but it was kind of that little extra touch we added during the Ludum Dare to just.
Okay, we have a question here. You have to come forward. Camera operators.
Okay. Thanks very much. I guess you're very powerful in coming up with a game, you know, that looks at kind of power and democracy and participation. To what extent were the kind of thought processes collaborative or individualistic kind of political ideas that you had when you started the design?
And who is the question for? All of them? Okay, so like, how democratic were you in your teams?
I love a democracy of one. Well, that's not strictly true. I did not know how to code when I started writing this game. So I had a very patient and extremely talented friend of mine called Scott McDonald, whose name appears at the end credits and who says, "Save the bees." That's what she wanted me to say. Scott taught me how to execute things, but as to the storyline and the choices the characters made and the narrative design and the terrible jokes, it was my decision all the way down, which has happened only a few times since in my game career. And auteur stuff is fun, but things I've made with other people go in such interesting directions and add so much richness to my experiences because I'm not an artist, and I don't do sound design, and even my twine capabilities could be hugely expanded as a team. But I think if you're a narrative designer, someone needs to have a vision, and then you can work with everybody else to execute it.
Yeah.
Emre, you want to add to that, or?
Ours was a weird situation because on the face of it, it was an amazing collaboration. You know, Nerio brought in their team. As I said, Emily Short joined as a separate, you know, as an individual writer, our composer. Myself. There's a group of people coming together to make this game. At the same time, we were not a democracy. We had an awkward boss who refused to join a Slack called George Orwell, you know, he was our boss. So we just had to follow and read everything and try to interpret not just Animal Farm, but all of his works, and trying to again constantly answer this question: what would Orwell do? And so a lot of design decisions were made that way, is that we presented a bunch of ideas and then we said, okay, we believe that's the choice he would have made. So that's what we are going to go with. So it was a weird combination of a very oppressive boss and the democratic team under it.
Yeah. And Gianluca, I guess for you it was different because it was like super fast game jam situation.
For us, it was different, but I think from us three, we have the most democratic choices because it was all us, and it's always a democratic decision in our team. So we're super democratic because there is no boss, there is no nothing. It's just us four. We came up with the ideas and we discussed them. And as you said, Hannah, it's like in a democracy, everything is super slow. And sometimes we get stuck, but it's okay. At the very end, we find a decision, we write it down, and then, try to create a game, make it out of it.
So thank you so much. I think we have to wrap it up because there's also a next session coming up in this space. I want to thank Hannah, Gianluca, and Imre for joining us and sharing these really nice insights in your games. So round of applause.
Nice to have met you all.
Yeah, and thanks to you for joining us for this first conversation. I think we can end the Twitch stream also in this moment. Thanks also to all the viewers out there on Twitch. You'll also be able to see the recording of this through Twitch later on if you missed it. Yeah, so thanks so much.